Minis are an affliction of mine, and my channel has been littered with these little things over the past few years, but that's not going to stop me. Not only because it gives me the chance to drive yet another example of the greatest car ever built, but also the Mini story is infinitely rich, with 40 odd years worth of lore for us to work through, so this is a Mini 30. Rover's anniversary special from 1989 that, as far as I'm concerned, saved the Mini brand. Far from yet another limited edition, however, this is a car that changed the Mini's fortunes, leading us towards that 90s Cooper-driven renaissance and towards the modern Mini as a whole. Before we get into it though, this car is to be auctioned by Manor Park Classics, so if you'd like to drive around in the chicest, the coolest, and probably now the most appreciated car in the world, then please do follow the link in the description. But we now need to go back to 1980, the year the Mini was put out to pasture. This was the year of the Austin Metro, undoubtedly the most important car launched by British Leyland in nearly 20 years, and the first piece in the puzzle of Chairman Sir Michael Edwards' product-led recovery. After all, the behemoth that was British Leyland had been nationalised 5 years previously, the nation now looking closely at how every penny was being spent. Having expanded and refitted the Longbridge plant, the Metro was to take the fight to the Super Mini class, replacing the original in the process. Back in the mid-70s, however, the Metro, or ADO 88 as it was then known, was planned to replace the Mini directly, meaning it would be smaller and cheaper than the likes of the Ford Fiesta, Renault 5 or Fiat 127. However, the planners at BL realised this was a poor decision, and hastily they rebodied ADO 88 into the larger Metro we're all familiar with. If you ever wondered why the track of the Austin Metro was so narrow relative to the body shell, well, now you know. I digress, however, because all this is a long-winded way of saying that the Mini's execution would therefore be delayed. Just from my introduction, you all know how much I love the Mini. But in the context of 1980, I don't understand why they didn't end production there and then. Sure, the Metro was larger, but that's what happens with 20 years of development. That's why the Super Mini class sprung up in the late 60s and early 70s, and it's why the smaller ADO 88 made no sense next to the Fiesta. The Mini did benefit from the birth of its son, however, gaining better soundproofing and the more refined, more reliable and more efficient A+ engine. The refitting of Longbridge also benefited the Mini, achieving better economies of scale and producing a higher quality car. Minis and Metros both came off the same final production lines, but a Mini was still a car from the 1950s. And that meant that it was significantly more labour intensive to build, and it was sold at a lower price compared to a cheaper to build Metro sold at a higher price. Similarly, and though people are pained to admit it, the Metro really did replace the Mini. In 1979, they produced 165,000 Minis. In 1981, however, they produced less than 70,000. And in that same year, they produced 165,000 Metros. Therefore, it made no business sense to keep building this car. Yet fortuitously, even if at a slower rate, they kept rolling off the lines. The year is 1979. And though everyone knew the Metro was coming, you head to your local Austin Morris dealer to buy a cutie. The problem is that you're met by a hell of a range. There are the round-nose entry-level cars, the Mini 850 City and Super, as well as the Mini 1000. But across the dealer are the posher, square-fronted Mini Clubman and hotted up Mini 1275 GT. Just to cap it off, there's the Mini Clubman Estate, and if we head around the back, there's the round-nose Mini 95 pickup and panel van. All in all, that's 4 engine capacities and 5 different body shells. It's no wonder so many people profess that the Mini never made any money. The Mini Metro finally came along in October 1980, but earlier that year, in preparation for the big day, BL took a scalpel to their small car range. Beside the improvements I mentioned, gone was every engine barring the 1000. Gone too was virtually the entire saloon car range, reorganised into the poverty spec Mini City and plush Mini HL, both with the old round nose front end. The commercials and the Clubman estate lingered around for a couple more years until the Metro van launched, but by 1982 we'd gone from 8 models down to 2, sharing 1 engine and 1 body shell. As a result, and with those improvements to production, the Mini was making more money than ever before, and what seemed like a ludicrous decision now made perfect sense. Regardless, by the mid-1980s, the Mini was undoubtedly an economy model. Sold with grey trim rather than chrome and with little pedigree from decades gone by, you'd be forgiven for forgetting it was still on sale. Austin Rover, as BL had by then become, were keen on finally ending its life somewhere around 1987, but by the time the calendar flipped, politics had intervened. You see, back in the mid-70s, British Leyland found itself on the verge of bankruptcy. Its constituent companies had merged only 7 years earlier under the premise that the new company was too big to fail. With egg on their faces, however, that line took rather a different meaning as the government of the day was forced into an effective nationalisation. The British economy was in a dire position at this point, the country often termed the sick man of Europe, and one of its largest employers was now collapsing. BL's sheer sales volumes, industrial output and immense supply chain were vital to the viability of the United Kingdom as a nation state, so it would have been economic suicide to do nothing. British Leyland came under state ownership in 1975, and over the coming years it was rationalised down to the aforementioned Austin Rover. But regardless of the existence of Margaret Thatcher, BL was always someday due to be privatised, and in final preparations for such an event, Sir Graham Day was appointed as chairman in 1986. Without wading too deeply into things, their reorganisation had taken them from bankruptcy to a slim profit, but things were still inconsistent and the image they portrayed still wasn't optimal. As a result, Graham Day's big idea was a policy of Roverisation, whereby the group would become known simply as Rover. Their marketing and model range would all move upmarket somewhat, aping the growth of Land Rover to above the likes of Ford and Vauxhall, but still far below the likes of BMW and Mercedes-Benz. The resulting re-engineered Metro and all-new Rover 200, launched in 1990 and 1989 respectively, were priced well above the likes of the Fiesta and Escort, with classier styling, higher levels of engineering and a sense of luxury that would have been alien to them only 10 years earlier. The bottom line was smaller volumes of course, but higher profits, and the Mini was an unlikely winner in that environment. The vehicle that lived its life as an entry-level economy car was concurrently a classic in its own time. In its accepted classless nature, the Mini had gone about its business in mobilising millions of people while simultaneously tearing up rally stages, dominating circuit racing, and becoming a fashion accessory with both the well-heeled and the cool. By 1987, the Mini was a cultural icon, yet Rover seemed barely aware of it. As an Austin, it was reduced to having grey bumpers and miserable interior trim. In short, there was nothing desirable about the average Mini. Sure, Rover kept the limited editions coming, but that was purely to get them out of the doors rather than improve perception. The Mini's death was averted not due to any bump in sales, but the realisation that these little cuties were the perfect channel for the concept of roverisation. Previously on TwinCam, we've discussed the rebirth of the Mini Cooper in 1990, very much a progression from the Mini 30 in embracing the car's performance history. But the 30 itself was the roverist Mini ever built, and I mean that in the best possible way. The headline is the comeback of the chrome. This was the first time since 1978 that a round-nosed Mini had a chrome grille, never mind the bumpers and door handles etc. that go alongside it. This was also the first ever Mini to have body colour wheel arches, and on this car that colour is cherry red pearlescent. This is as close as you're going to get to Rover's corporate shade, and doesn't it suit this car ever so well? It's a gorgeous colour, so regal in its clarity beside the chrome. Of the 3,000 Mini 30s built, 2,000 were in cherry, the other 1,000 in black, which at the time was still an unusual, often special order colour. But setting things off are the gold decals and the Mini Light style alloy wheels. This was the first time a Mini had ever been fitted with a wheel of this style, but so synonymous they are with the car that you'd never notice. They just fit. And inside, gone is any shade of grey, replaced with black dashboard trim and augmented by a rev counter, red carpets and, best of all, half leather seats, complete with little tags reminding you of the anniversary and a leather wrapped steering wheel. So the question now is why people wanted to drive a Mini. The whole chic, cool, throwback kind of thing is a given, and we all understand that today in a very easy way, but even in buying one of these in 1989, you were actively choosing to take a step down. A Metro is an easier car to live with. It is more practical, it is more comfortable. Everything about a Metro as an everyday car is better. So why were people so willing to put up with a Mini as a Mini? Well, first of all is the fact that people are always willing to lose a little bit in terms of usability purely for the sake of looking cool. That's something people have always done. But additionally, one drive in a Mini is all it really takes to realise just how alive these little things are. This feels to me at least to be a totally standard car, unmodified. So it doesn't have a loud exhaust on it, it doesn't have any suspension modifications to make it harsher, and yes, it's not a comfortable car. Minis generally weren't, at least the rubber cone ones weren't like this. But as soon as you turn the steering wheel, in fact, as soon as you set off, you very quickly realise that there is just something about this car that connects with you. There is a character within it that makes you want to just push on a little bit. I've said this before in many videos, but they absolutely want you to grab them by the scruff of the neck and just push on. Just find where that limit of grip is and where the understeer kicks in, and then you lift off and it oversteers. That's how a Mini feels, that's how a Mini wants to be. You sit over the steering wheel in this very, very commanding, if slightly uncomfortable driving position. And what it means is that you come into a corner and you sit and kind of hack slightly at the steering wheel. It just feels natural in a Mini to do. And then you come out of the corner and you get that wonderfully torquey A-series engine. It's not fast. This is a 1 litre, it's got 40 odd brake horsepower. But it doesn't matter when the car weighs less than 700 kilograms. I'm still getting up to speed just on these lanes here that are very quickly naughty. And it's only got 40 brake horsepower. That's the beauty of a tiny car. Then you add into the fact that it's a Mini, they just drive incredibly, to the fact that it's easy. Yes, it might not be as easy to live with in terms of comfort. If you're doing a big motorway journey, for example, you might not necessarily want to buy a Mini. But if you're poodling around town or darting through a city, there is nothing that can beat it. The visibility is fantastic around you. You can see the corner of the car, you can see the edge of that wing and the other one as well, which means it's so easy to place on the road. Even as a 30-year-old car in 1989, a prospective buyer would get into one of these, feel special in the fact that it's got the red carpets and the half leather seats and the leather wrapped steering wheel, and also the fact it looks so good. But on top of that, they drive it and then realise that yes, it has its problems, like the bounciness you've just seen. Yes, it's not enormously quick, and yes, it's not going to be as efficient as a Metro, but on the other hand, it still holds its own so well. Because in 1959, the world of the Austin A40 and the Morris Minor and the Ford Anglia, the Mini was brand new. The Mini was like nothing we'd seen before. The Mini was unusual, and that meant it was great. In 1989, a Mini would hardly have been a rational choice. But in this era, at the end of the 80s and into the 90s, the Mini saw its only real renaissance in terms of sales. Sure, the renaissance in terms of style and awareness was ongoing all the way through to 2000, but in terms of actual sales units, this reworked market attention Rover had thrusted upon the Mini took sales from a low of 33,000 in 1986 to 46,000 in 1990, just as Roverization was finding its feet. In the entire sphere of Mini lore, therefore, the Mini 30 does not sit alone. Around it were the likes of the flame red and racing green, morphing into the rebooted Mini Cooper. But hailing from 1989, the 30 is, as I mentioned, the Roverist of Minis, bringing back a style, elegance and dynamism that had all been sucked away in the 70s and 80s. This little car, therefore, plays a deeply understated role, not only in maintaining the Mini's image, but galvanising it when it mattered most, leading directly to the renaissance of the 90s and the very existence of the Mini Marque today. And with that, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please do click like and subscribe to TwinCam as well. I'm forever indebted to my wonderful Patreon supporters, so if you'd like to support me that way, then please do follow the link in the description. And I'll have more videos coming along soon.